So, welcome everyone to the first sessions for the National Conference of 2024. This is Making It as an Entrepreneur. I'm really excited with what our three speakers have to say today. Really quick, my name is Grant Burns. I am a Dollar General intern within INROADS with the Learning and Development Department. And I've been working closely with Yvonne McKinnon to really hope that this national conference can go well. So to start us off, I'm going to introduce the speakers, and we have Marcus Shute first. So he's an INROADS alum, and he's also the COO and founder of Pruuvn. So he has 35 years of experience in tech development and commercialization and operations in optical and wireless networks, software, and services. Marcus is an experienced entrepreneur with over 25 years as a senior executive of tech companies. He has successfully commercialized numerous products and services and secured $30 million plus in venture and contract funding. Dr. Shute earned his BS in mechanical engineering from Tennessee State. It's SM in material science from MIT and MS and PhD in mechanical engineering from Georgia Tech. And he was also a finalist in the NASA Mission Specialist Astronaut Program. That's really crazy. And a member of the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. So next, I'll be moving on to Bryan, who is a coworker of Marcus. He's CEO and founder. He has 15 years of experience managing billion-dollar infrastructure projects for multiple Fortune 500 companies. He has extensive experience with managing contract employees on large infrastructure projects. He also has experience in a lot of blockchain technology, and he leads one of the largest blockchain groups in the Southeast. So Bryan earned his BS in civil engineering, minoring in computer applications technology from the University of Alabama. He was also a standout football player, having played for the University of Alabama, and is also a member of the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. And so finally, we'll move on to Keyona, who is a business development lead, also founder and CEO, is an experienced business development and venture professional. Keyona has also held several positions where she strengthened the pipeline of minority founders solving diverse technical problems, such as CEO and founder of ReRev, as mentioned, general partner of Black Tech Capital, fellow of Venture for America, and investment strategist at Bronze Valley Fund. She has directed over $1 million of capital to diverse early stage entrepreneurs. Keyona has earned her BS in international business minoring in Chinese studies from the University of California, San Diego. She is an avid reader and loves advocating for local libraries and adult literacy. All right, so I hope I did you guys some justice with this introduction, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Grant. Thank you for the introduction. We're happy to be here today. I'm going to first ask our CEO, Bryan Hobbs, who's CEO of Pruuvn, CEO and co-founder of Pruuvn, to just say a few words about what Pruuvn is and what we do, and then we'll move right into the presentation. Keyona's going to share her screen and share the presentation now. I think that, okay, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, Bryan, while I get that pulled up, please feel free to talk about the company.
You're on mute, Bryan.
Excellent. Can you guys hear me? All right, excellent. Thank you. And so just to give you guys an overview of Pruuvn and what we are and what we do. So one of the things is we want to consider one of the leaders in safety, trust, and compliance management solutions. And so we use technology such as blockchain, as you heard earlier, something that I'm very into, as well as AI, to help empower both individuals and companies to showcase their trustworthiness and to ensure safety through secure, transparent, and customizable compliance solutions. And so if you think about things that you do on a daily basis when you want to get a job, a financial product or service or education opportunity. You usually have to verify your identity or verify things about you, whether it's education history, work history, whether it's just who you are as a person. You usually have to verify something of that form. We make it easy for you to do that and organizations to verify that information using advanced technology. And so that's something we do today with this interconnected world. So trust, safety, and compliance are really paramount going forward, as you may know, with the updated and new technologies that are coming out. And so that's a little bit about what we do at Pruuvn.
Great, Bryan, you want to go ahead and just say a little bit more about your career and background? Anything you want to add to the intro that Grant gave?
Yeah, so the intro was great. Appreciate that intro. And just to give you guys a little bit more background, I do, you mentioned I do have a minor in computer applications technology, while my degree is in civil engineering, and I focus more on transportation space. I do have a background as well as computer application technology, where I do coding as well as, and that's where the blockchain comes in. I've spent a number of years overseeing large infrastructure projects for government and private entities. And in that space, that's kind of led me to where I am today, and a couple of other things we'll talk about with regards to how I got through this journey, or how I arrived at this journey, and how this company has come about. So that's just a little bit more about my background, but I think they did a great job of explaining my bio.
Great. Keyona, you want to follow next?
Yeah, just to flesh out who I am and what I do some more. So we're based in the Southeast. I live in Birmingham, Alabama, the Magic City. And I got my career started in venture capital as an investment strategist. So got to see literally hundreds of pitch decks, if not thousands, and lead multiple companies, about 10, all the way from sourcing through the deal signing. And Pruuvn actually was one of the very last deals I did with my last employer before I left to start my own business. And in this business, which is called ReRev, I support companies like Pruuvn in their project management and business development and marketing, strategy and operations and implementation. I jokingly call myself a quiet third founder for the Pruuvn team, just because it's an all hands on deck situation, which if you've ever worked in a startup environment, you're familiar with. But I've loved my time here. They've been good to me, and I've learned an incredible amount of a lot of things in the business development marketing journey. So excited to continue to be a part of the team and build on what we've been building the last couple of years, and really see the company skyrocket. I'd say the other fun fact about me is that I'm a local DJ. So that is what I do a lot in my spare time here.
Great. I'm Marcus Shute. As it was mentioned, I've spent a lot of time in technology development and operations, worked in academia, government, and startup environment, moving ideas and products or technology from ideation through final product or service delivery. And I've had the opportunity to participate in a lot of programs and mentor entrepreneurs along their journey to develop their company or services. So it's been a great journey for me. I've raised a lot of money for startups at various stages, and happy to be part of the Pruuvn team, and happy to have met Bryan and Keyona. And if we have time permits, we'll talk a little bit more about our journey and how we all came together. But absent that, let's just move right into the discussion. We're going to do a round robin type of discussion where each one of us will talk about a point that we found interesting and helpful in our journey as an entrepreneur, and also leave time for questions at the end. So the three of us will go through one round of that, and then we'll do a second round emphasizing a key point, and then hopefully open it up for questions and discussion from you guys. So Bryan, I think you're first on deck.
Yeah, so thanks, Marcus. And so, so what I'm going to talk about is really, as you see on the screen, personal frustration catalyzes innovative solutions. Is really how a startup or comes about. It's just really interesting, and the same thing I have from a personal experience. So when you think about personal experience, how did encountering this problem in your own life highlight the need for a solution? Because the way Pruuvn came about is because I had an issue in my personal life, essentially that needed a solution. I had a problem and I needed a solution. That problem actually cost me money. And so that is something, when you're thinking about entrepreneurship, what problem are you solving? Is that something you personally experience? Because typically that is something that you really are passionate about. If you've experienced it and you want to start something and you want to find a solution or create a solution, typically having that personal experience really helps with that. That personal frustration or inconvenience, or whether you want to call it. And for me, it was a loss of revenue, a loss of money into the household. That really motivated me to take action, because as an individual who's just in the everyday world, you lose income and you're out here busting your butt. That's actually become something that can be motivating. Say, why am I losing this income due to this problem? And I feel like this problem is solvable. And so that's what came about, and that's how Pruuvn came about. I actually was able to develop a solution around being able to get people to work faster, get people to do things a lot quicker than they do in today's world from a manual process. And that process and solving that really helps me. And so that frustration I felt when that problem came about. And the next thing, essentially, once you have an idea of that problem, I really thought about, all right, so now I need a deep understanding of the problem that I'm talking about. And because I actually experienced the problem, I literally have a deep understanding of that problem. Maybe not as deep as you want to go when you're starting a new venture, but it gives you an idea because you experienced it. And so once I experienced that problem, I was able to go in and research it a lot more. And that's where I found out that I wasn't the only one having an issue of sorts. And so with that issue, that allowed me to learn more about the issue and learn more about what people are experiencing. And so that kind of turned me on to a passion of having the deep understanding and having the unique insight to gain from being directly affected. I think a lot of times when you start startups, when you're directly affected, it really gives you that passion and that drive to create something that can be a solution. And that kind of leads you into passion and commitment. And again, if you don't have the passion and commitment there, you likely will not succeed with creating anything, and really creating a startup, especially, is something that you're really going to have to think about. Are you really passionate enough about the problem, really to solve it? Because solving problems, you may do that on a daily basis, but solving a problem that is a multifaceted problem that a lot of people may experience is really a different animal. And so we really experienced that in developing and building out Pruuvn. And so when I think about it, how did your personal connection to the problem fuel your passion and commitment to finding a solution? Think about those things when you start thinking about building a product or building a solution to one of the problems that you've experienced. And also think about, do you think you would have been as driven if the problem was not personally relevant? Think about things you've done regularly on a daily basis, or things you've encountered or you've heard about. Think about, if you haven't experienced that, do you really care as much? And so those are some of the things I think, from my perspective, that's helped build this company and move things along, is because I personally experienced the issue. And that is always a good thing when you want to solve a problem. It actually is a problem that frustrates you. So, yeah.
Great. Well, we'll move right into the next point. Unless, Keyona, you have any comments you want to make about what Bryan just said, we have a couple of minutes, but you're up next.
Yeah, I'm up next. And there's definitely some things I'll say on that in my next section. But just to kick us off here, as I mentioned earlier, I've seen a lot of startups in my day. Ones that were idea stage, ones that are fully commercialized and ready to scale, and ones that have already multiple hundreds of millions of dollars that they're generating in revenue. So I've seen the gamut from what these startups are offering and the kind of people that are running them. And something that I think gets lost in the entrepreneurship conversation is because we have a tendency to really focus on the startup world. But small businesses are also very much so a part of the entrepreneurship conversation. And as you're considering, as you're playing around with the idea, with the identity of being an entrepreneur, I'd love for each of you to consider startup versus small business, a tech-enabled startup versus an efficient tech-enabled small business. What could that look like? The problems that you experience that usher you to start a business to solve the problem don't just have to be like your direct personal problems, because to be honest, like, of course, everyone on this call has different life experiences, but as people on the younger side, you've got a very limited scope of what life problems or what problems there can be, particularly problems that are solvable that by technology, the ones that can generate revenue and really scale to the masses. So it's important to be flexible in that identity, that perspective, in deciding what it makes sense for you to be as an entrepreneur, like where you want to get started with first. And kind of to that point is the thesis of this little section, which is before you're thinking about launching a startup or a small business, it's really important that you get educated and you get real with yourself. I love to say that entrepreneurship is, quite frankly, one of the most spiritual things I've ever done, because it forces you to look at what's going wrong with a stark white light of clarity. You can't shy away from things that are from your weaknesses because they're probably showing up in the business. For example, being disorganized. If you're disorganized, that's going to show up in your business with a viciousness. And it'll prevent you from making money and from scaling. There are other problems, like if you prefer to work alone or you don't get along well with others, and that's an identity that you stick to, and it's not something that you have chosen to work on and improve your emotional intelligence, that's gonna bite you in the butt every single day of your entrepreneurship life. And so there's a lot of things that when you get serious about preparing yourself to start a business, that you have to look inward for. So that's one part of the equation, to really do a self-assessment. And the question of, am I ready to be an entrepreneur, will always be no. And a key lesson in entrepreneurship is to do it anyways, when it's smart to. You want to make smart, decisive actions going forward. So yes, know thyself. Another part of self-awareness is understanding the world around you. So like, for example, if you come from a poor family and this family's going to need monetary support from you and are even expecting that, then it may not be sensible to start a business, because that's a time and financial risk. However, if you're in a place where you've got a bit of savings piled up, you're in a job, or you're like comfortably in a position where you feel like you could walk away from this job, develop new skills through your new business, grow the business a bit, even a lot, and see where that journey takes you. That's like one way to approach it. So it's just being very real, because I think sometimes it's really easy to get caught up in a dream. We get sold the dream of entrepreneurship through YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok all the time, and people are like, you know, I left my 9 to 5 and I was making $200,000 a year to become an entrepreneur, and it was hard, but I came through on the other end, and now my company's worth $20 million. And it's like, that's fabulous. You know, those are people's real stories. But when you're creating your own story, don't put yourself or your family in jeopardy when it's unnecessary. There are people in certain life circumstances where entrepreneurship is the only route forward. Because if you're, let's say, in an impoverished country, and I work with many entrepreneurs in Africa, if you're in an impoverished country, there aren't jobs for you. And so you have to go and create your job to create your income to support your family. But a lot of you aren't in that situation. So I just want you to approach entrepreneurship smart and wise. Consider, do I have the finances for this? Do I have the emotional and familial community support to do this? And am I ready for the emotional turmoil and development that's going to be required to become the best entrepreneurship that I can be? And as a part of that, while you're working full time or you have other things going on, there are always ways for you to test your ideas. And I'm hesitant to use the word idea because nobody cares about your ideas. They care about, can you solve their problem and can you do it in a cost-effective manner? So if you're like, oh, this is my great big business idea, unless it's a great big business problem that other people are willing to pay you to solve, let go of the mindset of, oh, I just have to come up with a business idea, when in reality, you're a scientist and you need to discover problems, develop hypotheses, and then test them in a systematic, methodical way. So you can then determine, okay, based off of the information I have, I think this is a pretty good solution to a problem that at least 30,000 professionals are having. And I think they'll be willing to pay for it. Now it's time to invest more time, invest more money, invest more resources into developing that into a business. And then, of course, when it comes to developing your entrepreneurship skills, I think 90% of that work is actually just emotional development. So self-help, therapy, watching content that's about developing your communication skills, huge. So those soft skills are super duper important because you can go onto YouTube and watch a 15-minute video and learn how to launch a LinkedIn ad campaign or learn how to tweak your financial models. Those hard skills can be like easily learned and are very straightforward, but it's those soft skills that are going to separate you from someone who has tried and played with entrepreneurship and starting a business to being a successful serial entrepreneur who can solve problems at scale and commercialize solutions. So think about your entire life situation, your internal world, your external world, before you take the entrepreneurship plunge, and see if you can test these ideas in small ways before you devote so many resources to them. That's it for me. I'll pass it on to you, Marcus.
Okay, great. Yeah, we're going to touch on some of those subjects a little later in the presentation in more detail. I'm going to talk about the importance of engaging the customer and really testing your hypothesis or the principle or the question you're trying to solve or issue you're trying to solve when you're developing a product or a service. I'm a startup mentor at ATDC at Georgia Tech, the nation's oldest incubator. I interact a lot with students, faculty, and other entrepreneurs to guide them through this customer discovery process and really, engaging them in evaluating their business idea or hypothesis before they actually spend money or resources trying to develop a solution. So I'm going to talk about the importance of getting out of the building and engaging your customer early and often. It's very important that you have conversations with your target customer before you start investing a lot of time and resources to make sure that you're actually building something that the public or the customer that you're targeting will buy and actually pay you for. That's very important. In mentoring other startup founders, many times we get very passionate about a problem that we've experienced. Bryan talked about how Pruuvn came about. It was a problem he experienced initially himself, and he began to do the research and talk to others who may experience similar problems. So that's part of what we mean when we say get out of the building, get out of your own head and outside of your comfort zone and engage potential customers, those who may be experiencing the same problems, or those who are in the same situation you found yourself in, and just engage them in conversation to find out what problems are they facing, what are the challenges they face in a particular area, how you might, what solutions they found to solve that problem, if any. And then you use that information to help tailor your solution and build something, either a service or product that actually satisfies a critical need that people will pay money for. I found a lot of entrepreneurs, they come up with unique solutions to a particular problem that they've had or they've experienced or they've seen, and they don't take the necessary step to engage the customer or potential customer to find out if, in fact, they're solving a problem that everybody else is experiencing. That's very important because you may be developing something that just a small sector or small niche of folks may experience, and you can't really build a scalable business around that. So it's very important that you do, one formal way of getting out of the building is to do surveys, focus groups, where you identify people who you think may be experiencing this problem and actually have a conversation with them by asking open-ended questions so you can get their honest feedback about, the problem they're experiencing and what they've tried to solve it. And then you may test out your hypothesis by, offering your solution. You're not really trying to sell it at this point. You're just trying to gather information and collect information to help you better tailor your solution so that, again, people will pay you for it. Because one thing that I've seen many times that people will spend money developing a software platform or an app, and then they go out into the market and expect or put it on, Google Play, or whatever it is to market your app, and they expect people are going to buy it, but they haven't done the necessary homework to make sure they're solving a problem that people, have a need or will pay for. There are two types of solutions in my mind. There's one that are solutions to hair on fire problems, problems which everybody experiences, and they're looking for a solution and are willing to pay for that solution. Then they're nice to have solutions that, it'd be nice to have an app that does this, but I wouldn't necessarily pay for it. It'd make my life more convenient, but it really is not going to deliver value that I feel is worth paying for. So you don't want to be in that second category. You want to be in the category where your solution will satisfy a problem that people are willing to pay you for. And that's really the first step toward building true product market fit. In order to build a fundable company and one that's scalable, you have to have a solution that satisfies a particular problem. It fit for a particular market, and people are willing, again, I've said this several times, are willing to pay for it. That's the way investors evaluate true product market fit. They look at your revenue from your solution, and the only way you can gain that kind of traction and generate revenue is, developing a unique solution that solves a particular problem in a unique way. And we may talk a little bit more about that as we move through the presentation, because that's another challenge in itself, developing a solution that's unique and one in which you can protect from others, encroaching on your market share. But that's a different topic about intellectual property that we'll talk about. So again, this whole thing about getting out of the building came from Steve Blank, probably 15 years ago. It's part of lean startup engineering, some people call it. And it's a critical point in customer discovery. And it's the foundation for achieving product market fit. And once you achieve that, you can begin to scale and launch your company. So hopefully we'll have more time as we move through the presentation to touch on some other points that we've emphasized so far. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Bryan. We'll go through this. This will be the second round of our discussion of key topics, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thanks, Marcus. And so I'm going to the things I'm going to talk about now kind of lead from what Keyona talked about and Marcus talked about. So we talked about the problem. If you experience it yourself and going out and actually learning more about who else is experiencing these problems, whether you can actually start a business from entrepreneurship standpoint, are you in a position to do that? All that leads me to now where we want to talk about navigating the funding maze. So the challenges of VC, which is venture capital, so actually raising money. We at Pruuvn have raised a significant, what we consider a significant amount of money right now, but we're also capital efficient. And so one of the things about starting or creating a business that is fundable, I think Marcus mentioned that it has to be a fundable business. There are going to be a lot of rejections and setbacks. That is the norm. I think we've, the saying of you're going to have to go through 100 venture capitalists before you actually get one to say yes. I think that's the number. I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, Marcus or Keyona, but you're going to have 100 meetings with individuals who have money, who fund startups before you get a yes. So setbacks and rejections, that's a norm when it comes to starting a company. We've gone through many. There are times when you want to sit back and say, I know this in your mind, this business is fundable, but those VCs are going to tell you something completely different. They're gonna shoot you down, and you're going to have to be able to accept that, and continue to push on, because a lot of people accepting rejection, especially the way VCs or venture capitalists deliver a rejection, it can be a little intimidating and a little heartbreaking at the same time. But when you do finally get those who do say yes, that is a enjoyable feeling, because you do, at that point, you have some validation. Say somebody understands what we're talking about and what we're trying to do here, and they understand that. And that's something that we've gone through, and as a startup, you just go through in general. Another thing you want to think about in the VC space, or funding, or whether you even want to even go after funding. One of the things that we did here, we self-funded. I think Keyona talked about, are you ready to start to venture out and to create a company or entrepreneurship? Some people are not. Some people can self-fund a company. We actually self-funded this company in the beginning. And for a while, we self-funded until Marcus came on and helped us, and he helped us understand, what it takes to become a fundable business. And so, that is something you're going to have to grapple with. Like Mark said, you don't want to go out and spend a lot of money, because if you don't have a lot of money and it needs to go somewhere else, that is something you're going to have to really grapple with. Self-funding versus VC funding. But then there's also control versus investment. When you do bring on venture capitalists, there is a thought process here of how much of your company do you want to give up. Understanding that is very complex. That is something, however, you're going to have to deal with and think about when you're building an organization or building a company. Do you want to control that organization for the foreseeable future, which could lead to slow growth? Or do you want to grow fast, and can you grow fast, which from a VC firm or venture capitalist firm, you're going to take on money, which typically means you're going to give up a piece of your company. Those are things you're going to have to grapple with when you get to that point, and you think you're ready to move forward to a scalable position. And so just think about those things. I mean, there's a lot of things to think about. You have a number of things to think about in the forefront before you even start a business, when you actually are looking to grow a business, and then when you're looking to how long you want to control that company and what that looks like for you in the future and your team. So those are some of the things that you want to think about when you're grappling with moving forward and expanding an organization. I think, Keyona, you're next.
Before we go there, there's one thing I do want to say. We have a few more minutes. There are several different types of funding, so you really need to become familiar with what is the best funding solution for your stage of development of your company. Bootstrapping or self-funding a company is typically the first step, and then maybe taking on friends and family versus jumping right into venture capital. And Keyona can also speak to this too. And then angel investing is another strategy you might look at before you delve into venture capital funding. So I just want to point that out, that there's some other options besides going straight to a VC, right out the gate.
Right, yeah, because we actually took on, we did friends and family, and we did have done angel as well. So yeah, so there, as Marcus mentioned, there are multiple ways than going directly to VC from self-funding.
And keep in mind, not every business it depends on how, and there's no like right or wrong answer here. It's just what's right for you. I think there's like definitely a lot more mythos around VC, and there's a particular type of company that VC dollars make a lot of sense for. And if you aren't in that pool, don't let getting VC money be your goal. The goal should be well funding the business, or wisely funding the business as it needs, and even when you're raising VC money, the more money you take on, the more control you give up. So you want to be careful about really, really closely defining how much money do we actually need to get where we're trying to go in the next 18, 24 months, and then coming to a number and working backwards to get to the number that you're trying to raise. And not just going out there to be like, I want to raise as much money as possible. Because when you see, I think the media definitely has a big play in this. When you see headlines like, oh, this company was able to raise 100 million, or they raised 500,000 or whatever, like, cool. Hopefully it makes sense for their business. So I don't want you to think that like successful equals how much money you can raise. Successful is how much revenue you bring in, and how much profit you're able to keep from the revenue that you did bring in. That's period, point blank, the ultimate success metric. And if bringing on more money, whether through VC, equity diluting finance, or grants, which aren't dilutive, so those are nice, but harder to get. And then loans is another big category of like debt financing that doesn't take equity, but comes with extra strings in terms of how quickly you have to pay it. So
Yep.
when you're
Great point.
considering financing, and this leads me into like, I guess like my pre-point here is right now, over the last 2 years, we have entered a new world in terms of our accessibility to large language models. Use those. You've got Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude. I use them on a daily basis because if you don't understand something, what makes you ready for entrepreneurship, or what's a part of the entrepreneurship mindset, is consistently seeing things in terms of oh, that's a problem, how can I solve it? So if you the way that you typically experience problems is that you kind of like throw your arms up and you walk away, you are not emotionally developed enough to become an entrepreneur right now, because entrepreneurship is like 12 problems every day. And then on Fridays, you get 16 problems. It's a little treat before you go to the weekend. So you have to have a mindset of, I can solve any problem that comes to me. And it doesn't have to be like literally you. It's also, think of the entire thing of resources that is available to you. Your friends and family, your community, your teachers, LinkedIn. So complete professional strangers are also available to you. And y'all being younger on this call, especially those that are in school, many professionals, I would say the vast majority of them, will happily say, yes, I will absolutely talk to you for 20 minutes. And then you come in with a clear agenda or a question that you have, like, hey, I really like what you were able to do at this company. I'm new to marketing and am trying to improve my skills. Where do you think I should focus? Or this is a problem that I'm trying to solve for the business that I work for. How have you approached this problem in the past? They will eat that stuff up. Take advantage of that. As you're not just building companies, but improving yourselves. I think for everyone on this call, even if you have no intentions of being an entrepreneur, the entrepreneurship mindset is really powerful because it's a problem-solving mindset. And it's one that says, I am capable of learning, of understanding, learning, and solving every obstacle and problem that I approach, or that comes my way. And you can, by the way, everyone on here is completely capable of that. You just have to believe that you're capable of that, adopt that identity, and then live in it, right? So, and that's like one part of the equation in terms of an entrepreneurship mindset. The other part of the entrepreneurship mindset that sometimes gets lost is, and I think this is such a beautiful lesson, is to be relentless about metrics. Because you can get really clear about what it is you're trying to do and what numerical indicators tell you that you're on the right track or tell you that you need to make a pivot. You can solve problems and iterate a lot faster than if you didn't have those metrics with you. Because if you have a low response rate for a survey that you sent out, the answer is not, oh, people just don't want to fill out surveys. It's, oh, I gotta communicate in a different way, or maybe the survey isn't the best way to get what I want to get done. So every time something doesn't work, assume that it was an approach error or an error in how you thought about the problem, and not in any other aspect. I think such a powerful thing about being in entrepreneurship is learning how to take accountability and responsibility for everything. Because at the end of the day, what you are able to take home and feed your family with is directly correlated to the revenue that you are able to bring in. So when you can get like really specific and relentless about that, you can really go far. So even if you're not an entrepreneur or even thinking about entrepreneurship, being able to go, what is my company's number 1 goal? And the answer is bringing more revenue, unless you work for a nonprofit. But even then, if you're on the fundraising side of the house, it is bringing more revenue, bringing more income. So understand what the company's goal is, and then understand what your department's goal is, understand your boss's goal, and then make sure that you're prioritizing accordingly. I'm a big advocate for prioritizing revenue generating activities versus revenue supporting activities. So something that can have an immediate impact on your company is making very compelling email copy if you're in the marketing department. That's a big deal. So focusing your extra learnings on how to become a better copywriter is a great use of your time. Whereas learning things that aren't directly in front of you may not be the smartest way to spend your time. It depends on how much is on your plate, and each of you have your own individual lives. But I spoke on this a little earlier. There's a lot of mythos around entrepreneurship. Take what works from you, leave what doesn't. Don't get caught up in the hype, because you have to live your life in a wise way that doesn't expose you to too much risk, but at the same time is a good way to spend your youth. Youth is such a gift because it gives you time to fail and recover. But the thing is, you're going to be failing and recovering until you die. So that getting used to that mindset and that approach now will be such a beautiful blessing to yourself for the rest of your life. On a side note to that, I highly recommend that each of you get into sales, because there is nothing that'll skill build your communication and your ability to live and pivot by the metrics, like being in a sales job. Even if it's like, oh, I have no intention of being in this as a long-term career, do it for like a year or two. You would be astonished by how much you learn. And another big thing about entrepreneurship is that you're going to be uncomfortable literally all the time. So get used to it. Like, that feeling can exist without you having to act on that. Sometimes entrepreneurship feels bad because like maybe you haven't figured out a problem, and despite talking to other people and doing everything that's within your locus of control to solve that problem, it's still persistent. It sucks and it feels awful, and that's okay. Like, it can feel awful and you can keep going anyways. And I talked about this earlier too, like, definitely have a scientific approach to problem solving for the business ideas that you're considering. Yes, a survey and focus groups, those are excellent ways to get feedback from your customers. Also see, are people willing to pay for this? Because if you set up think of what is the most small version of this product that I can create online. And that could sometimes straight up just be a landing page and a video. Will people sign up for my newsletter? Will they give me their credit card information? That's a great signal that what you're doing is actually solving a problem for something, So talk to ChatGPT. Be like, this is the idea that I have. What are some tests that I could set up that are super low cost or even free to see if people want to buy this? And just expanding on that idea a little bit more, I'm a huge believer in defining and creating the smallest viable version of your idea before you take it to market or try to grow it or anything like that. Because with minimal time and investment, you can figure out, hey, is this worth me dumping all these resources in it? Or do I need to try a different approach or a new idea or something like that? So having, and the smallest viable version can often be a Google Sheet and some kind of interface, right? So get creative. Think of the tools that you are already comfortable with, whether that be Notion or video editing with CapCut, and see if you can build your idea around just using the tools that you have first, getting feedback, and then iterating into bigger versions once you're ready. So yeah, those are my last points.
No, that's great, Keyona. And one thing I forgot to mention when we talked about getting out of the building and customer discovery is that developing the minimum minimum viable product, the MVP, is very important. And Keyona just described that beautifully about, I mean, for a software solution. You can do the same thing for a hardware solution as well. Try to develop some kind of prototype, initial prototype that you can test in the marketplace with certain customers that you feel will be your first target customers, and get that, get direct feedback from the person, the end user, so that you can better tailor and tweak your solution and then pivot if necessary. So that's very, very important. The last area that I'm gonna cover, or we're gonna cover formally, is talking about the fact that entrepreneurship demands resiliency and adaptability. And I always use this saying that entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. And Bryan and Keyona both touched on this in their discussion. It requires some emotional maturity. You got to sort of separate yourself emotionally from the idea and your concept. You got to be passionate about it and to pursue it, but you have to be ready for that critical feedback. And like Bryan mentioned, especially when you're going before VCs where they see, maybe 10 deals a day, if not more, you have very limited time to convey your idea and your concept and sort of sell it to them, so they'll want to invest in it. And many times they're going to give you harsh criticism and feedback that might hurt your feelings, but you've got to be, strong-willed and determined, and be willing to take that critical feedback and take what you can use, and better develop your solution for the next time. And don't get too caught up in, don't take it personal, I guess is the way I would explain it. The first startup or first formal startup that I joined, we were building optical switches. We ended up raising about $23 million in Series A and A prime funding. We made some mistakes along the way that I learned from, but one of the most frustrating things for me was building a team. We did everything that they told us to do to close these deals. And it was always one criteria. I always talk about the moving goalpost or goal line. We did everything they told us to do. And when we got to that point, it seemed like the goal line moved again. And some of that was because of who we were. And when we have time, we'll talk about that, the challenges that founders of color in particular have in raising venture capital funding. But it got to the point where, I was taking it personal initially. And because I built a team, we scaled from 6 people to 120 folks or so over the period of about 9 months. And then in the end, by 24 months, we were back down to 6 people. That's I'll explain that a little later. But the point is, building a company, scaling a company is like an emotional roller coaster. And it requires a certain mindset that you have to be determined, passionate about your idea, strong-willed, but you got to have thick skin and take the criticism that you can use, because all of it won't be useful. Take the criticism that you can use, better equip yourself to move forward, pivot if you need to, and refocus and continue. There are going to be many challenges that you'll face. I hired a lot of my friends in our first startup. I felt responsible for them. That placed a lot of emotional stress on me as one of the co-founders of our first startup. But you've got to be equipped to handle those kind of challenges and look for different outlets to maintain your sanity while being focused and passionate about pursuing your product. One of the things I talk about in terms of the emotional challenges and taking emotion out of it is that you've got to be willing to change your focus and your idea. Pivot, not necessarily change the entire focus, but you may get feedback from the market, from investors, from your customer focus group, from your initial set of folks you talked to when you were doing customer discovery. You may get feedback that sort of points you in a direction that, hey, maybe the solution is not the solution I thought it was, or maybe people are not going to pay me for this particular solution. You've got to take the emotion out of that. Most entrepreneurs or founders treat their first startup like it's their baby, like it's their child. And that's great. I mean, you need to be that passionate about the idea, but you've also got to listen to the data, take the emotion out of it. If the data is telling you that, hey, the customer's saying they don't really care about this problem, or they care about the problem, but they're not willing to pay me for for the solution to the problem. That's information that you need to use to make realistic decisions about your next steps in that startup. And it may require you to change your focus slightly, or what we call pivot. And that's very important. And Keyona touched on it a little earlier. You're going to be pivoting, so to speak, the rest of your career. You may not view it that way, but I've had a long career in technology. And I look back on when I first started at Bell Laboratories. I wanted to be the best scientist, and I've made some great discoveries, have a bunch of patents for the things that we did in those years. But I look at my career and I've pivoted to the point now where I don't hardly do any, in my opinion, it's not really hardcore science or technical work. Now we leverage blockchain and AI and other things in our solution. But me personally, I'm not doing the kind of bench level work I was doing early in my career. So I can see the pivots in my career. And one thing I would tell you as an entrepreneur is that you're going to have to pivot multiple times, not only in your journey starting your company, but just in life in general. And it all goes back to taking the data that you're able to collect, sift through what's useful, because all of it won't be useful. I'll say that again. You're going to get some feedback, and you do a sanity check. You say, is this really valid feedback? Do they have a great point here? Is this something I need to take into consideration? You go through that process, use what you can, and then move forward. And that's been very helpful in my career and as an entrepreneur in general. You just, one thing I usually tell first-time founders rather is that when people give you feedback, don't treat the idea as your baby, like you're very passionate about it, but don't get attached to it, so that you're able to move forward once you get signals from whomever that this is not the solution they're looking for. The main thing, or the final thing I'll say before we open it up for some questions, is that being an entrepreneur requires you to keep the end goal in mind, no matter what obstacles you encounter, and see it through to the finish. I mean, there's a poem that Bryan and I both learned as we were pledging Omega Psi Phi that talks about head out to the finish, see it through. And it's very important that you maintain focus on your goal and you move toward that goal despite what happens along your journey. Because again, it's about pivoting, keeping the end goal in mind. You want to build a profitable, scalable company. It might not be the solution that you thought about when you first started the company, but as long as you take the data along the way, take that into consideration, use what feedback you can that you can acquire from potential customers in the market in general, take the useful information, change your approach slightly or your solution slightly, or pivot, and then keep focused toward the end goal and driving toward the finish. And one thing to remember, don't entrepreneurship is a roller coaster. Don't get too high on the wins and don't get too low on the disappointments. You've got to stay focused and sort of even keeled to survive this thing. And it's very important to have outlets outside of your startup to maintain what I call your sanity. I'm still an athlete, so I try to participate in those kinds of things outside of work, just to maintain a level of balance. It's very important for your emotional well-being and your physical well-being as well. So with that, we'll open it up for a couple of questions from the audience. If we have any, we have some other points we could talk about as well, but we'd like to hear from you and talk about something that might be on your mind or pressing question that you have. So I see some in the chat. Let me see if I can. Okay, the first question in the chat is from Takoya Washington. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Do you want to come off mute and voice your question, or you rather for us to read it? I think you have the ability to come off mute.
Hi.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
And my question was, what is an experience that changed the way you viewed entrepreneurship? And what was your opinion before and after said experience?
Yeah, great question. The experience for me was, I came from Bell Laboratories, and my first tech startup, it was called LuxCore Networks. We were building optical switches, which is a hardware solution. very resource intensive. It required a lot of money to build that. I viewed working in a startup initially the same way I viewed working for AT&T. And it's not that way. And Keyona touched on it a little while earlier. We wear multiple hats in a startup company. You have to be prepared to roll up your sleeves, jump right in, and do whatever is necessary to be successful. I was used to having, I was a manager at Bell Laboratories, so I had a staff of folks. So I was used to delegating a lot of some things that, that I don't want to say it was routine or mundane, but I was used to delegating, put it that way. And in a startup environment, you don't have that luxury. And besides, you want to conserve resources, so you may not need to pay a lot of people to do things you can do yourself. So the experience I had was realizing in a startup, you have limited resources. You've got to be willing to jump in and do whatever necessary to be successful and not rely on delegating to other folks. Now, that doesn't mean you can't outsource or use contractors, because we do that a lot, but you've got to be willing to do whatever necessary to be successful. Bryan or Keyona, you have anything you want to add to that?
I think what I'll say is pretty similar. Just my corporate background and what you do in the corporate world or anywhere outside of entrepreneurship is a lot different. I think my first year and starting Pruuvn, probably slept 24 hours total the entire year. So, you're not, sleeping is not an option. So that changed the perspective because, in a regular job corporate world, you've got schedules or some sort that you're following. But when you start into entrepreneurship, like Marcus said, you're all of it. You're all hats. You're doing everything. So didn't get much sleep. That changed my view. But as they say, see it through.
Keyona, you have anything to add?
I would definitely say probably a big turning point for me in my entrepreneurship journey in the last year is getting really serious about metrics. Because then they allowed me to stop making excuses and get serious about tackling some problems, because it wasn't just oh, but this happened, oh, but this happened. And to the point where now in my head, when I hear my brain making excuses, I'm literally shut up. It's just tired, It's nobody wants to hear that. I don't want to hear it. So getting rid of that track or that defensive, exclusive response internally, and using external concrete things to help me break out of that was really powerful, I think, in just changing what I've been able to accomplish and lower my own stress. Because instead of it being oh, it just happened to me, it happened to me. Being able to go, okay, this is where I have responsibility, this is where I have autonomy in this situation, and these are the metrics I can use to further myself towards that goal, has been just a very powerful mindset.
Great. Paige Malcolm had a question that she put in the chat. How do you balance? Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So, well, thank you guys for all of the information that you've given so far. I appreciate that INROADS has the entrepreneurship track. I'm not sure if they had it last year, but my question is, how do you balance speed to market in a growing niche while wanting the product, which would be a tech-based platform or just any product, to be developed well? So balancing speed and quality.
Yeah, that's a delicate balance. One of the things I'll tell you is that working in a large R&D focused company, we had the luxury of, we already had market share, so we had the luxury of waiting till what we felt like was the perfect solution to roll it out to the marketplace. That's not the same approach you should use as an entrepreneur, in my opinion. You want to develop the MVP that's necessary to solve the problem you're trying to solve, and then get it out in the marketplace and get feedback from that to better refine the solution. So it's important that it satisfies the minimum functionality that people are going to pay for. And then you start getting more feedback from the user group, from the end user, to better refine the solution. So that's the really delicate balance you have to achieve. You can't afford to wait, especially as a startup company, wait to develop or achieve the perfect solution, because you'll never get there, for one. And number two, somebody else with more resources may come along and capture the market before you're able to get there. So Yeah, it's hard to balance, but it's necessary. But I would say err on the side of getting it out to get the feedback, and then tweak it and refine it as necessary. Bryan and Keyona, y'all got anything to add to that?
I'll add in here that in my earlier response to, during the slides, I mentioned defining what your minimum viable product is. What's the smallest viable version of this product? Getting clear about that quickly and use all the resources at your disposal to do so really helps, because then you can communicate. You can communicate with your first like 10 people that, hey, this is our MVP. We're a startup and we're just looking to get feedback. But being mindful of, we want to do this in 1 week sprints, right? And maybe the customer doesn't even know that, but that's your internal operation setup. So that way you can get a product out there as its most minimum viable self, get feedback, iterate, do it again, you know? So it definitely is a very delicate balance. And depending on what your product is or what you're trying to build, like that can be, it's gonna be difficult, because everything about this is difficult, but it's a difficulty that you can manage. But speed in terms of getting the product to market is important. So even if you can't, maybe you're doing a beta test with a small amount of individuals, you can still get signups with a live website and an explanatory video. So that way it's in your customer's mind that you're coming. Like in a couple of weeks, in a month or so, they're just doing beta tests. And you can even have people sign up to be beta testers, and they'll be excited to try out your glitchy, half-baked product because they want to be a part of the startup process. It's exciting. So take advantage of that.
Bryan, do you have anything before we move to the next question?
No, I'll just second what you both are saying. Really get your product out. I mean, at the end of the day, get your product out, get the feedback, because you do need that customer feedback. I know there's many times that, I've heard customer feedback, and essentially not all feedback is going to be something you're going to implement. I'm going to say that as well, because I know there is probably a feature in our system that we probably shouldn't have implemented early on in the beginning of this company. But as they mentioned, you want to get your product out because you need that feedback to iterate and grow. So I agree.
Great. We got
Thank
Mr. Meridian. Did I pronounce it correctly? You had your hand up.
Yeah, hello, you're saying it correctly. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'm a tax research intern for the company Transamerica and also an upcoming junior at Virginia Commonwealth University. And my question for you guys is, with the knowledge that you have now, if you could go back to your early entrepreneurial years, what are some things that you would do differently that you think would either help you reach higher success or success more quickly?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have a great example to give you. We started the company LuxCore Networks. I talked about that. We raised 10 million on our Series A round, which was more than enough money to do what we needed to do. But at that time, I think most of us were under the age of 35 or so. And we were leaving large companies, going into a startup environment. And we, in my opinion, looking back on it in retrospect, we could have saved a lot of money in what we were doing. We were trying to build, we took the corporate environment and tried to, transplant that into a startup environment. We had enough money to do it. I hired a lot of brilliant scientists and engineers to do what we did. We built 2 optical routers that had never been built in the world, and demonstrated we could do all optical wavelength conversion. I know it's real technical, but the point is we did something nobody else had ever done. And our company was probably 90% African-American. So, a lot of folks had trouble believing that we were able to do what we did. The one thing I would do differently is focus on a particular product set or feature set. It goes back to what Keyona mentioned earlier, developing the MVP. We try to develop an elegant solution, spend a lot of money doing that instead of building a very specific solution initially, launching that, and then gaining the market share and revenue and using that to fuel other growth. So what I would say is the one thing that I learned is focus on a certain problem, a specific problem, a subset of a larger problem, solve that first, use that to demonstrate traction, and then use, revenue to scale and grow to develop other solutions. So just be very focused is the bottom line on a particular problem initially is what I learned. Bryan, Keyona?
Yeah, one thing I'll say that I've learned, your ecosystem. One thing I didn't in the beginning have and didn't understand or know anything about was the ecosystem that was available to you, the resources. I actually began out sending my idea out to multiple people, just random people, on LinkedIn and so forth, until one day I got a message back from right now a very prominent VC who at this point who told me to call him. I was like, okay. So I called him, and essentially he just gave me the rundown. At the time I was in Atlanta here, and he gave me the rundown and told me exactly what I needed to do and get involved in the ecosystem. Don't send your idea out to multiple people out who could be, they're not going to pay attention to it. You need to get in the ecosystem, learn how entrepreneurship works, and you will go far that way. And quite honest, I tell that story all the time because that helped me a lot. I probably wouldn't be here today if I had not listened and gotten involved in the ecosystem that you're around. So wherever you're at, wherever you are, if there is an entrepreneurship ecosystem, just get involved because it evolves fairly rapidly. So that's something I learned, and we'll look back on what I did differently in the beginning.
I'll say it's definitely hard to reflect and be like, what do I wish I would have known? Because it's like a lot of the lessons that you learn can only be learned through living and experiencing them. And so there are some things it's like, oh, if I had read this book, or if I read this article, or if I knew this information, and that's like true. But I think there, as you're hearing, like these are lessons learned. Truly, there's only so much you can learn that will prepare you for entrepreneurship before you just start. And there's no greater teacher than experience when it comes to doing this. That said, I'm a huge believer in making smart mistakes. And it's kind of like how, the notion that there are no dumb questions. There are dumb questions. There are also dumb mistakes. Dumb mistakes are mistakes that you, with like a reasonable amount of research, could have seen. So like there's so much content now. You are up to your eyeballs in content in terms of entrepreneurs talking about their journeys, what they wish they knew, how they do customer service now, or what they put into place to help them with project management. So I won't necessarily, because there's definitely things that I wish I had done sooner in my entrepreneurship journey. But I would say there's absolutely a hard limit to what you can know beforehand, and that most of this is going to be learned through doing. But you can educate yourself. So if you develop a habit now of curating high quality entrepreneurship materials for yourself, like Rich Dad Poor Dad, for example, don't read that. Don't read that. That has nothing for you. However, going in and like reading, improving your emotional intelligence, understanding personal finance, understanding business finance, those are good uses of your time and energy. So get tactical to be like, what skill am I going to pick up from this, whether it's a hard skill or a soft skill? That's important. So just create an education habit for yourself outside school.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions in the chat, so I want to make sure we get to those. The first one is from Imoni Graves. How would you define success as an entrepreneur? That's a pretty broad. There are many metrics you could use. I mean, for me, I'll speak for me. It's money. For me, it was how much revenue can I generate. That's one metric I used early in my career. Now it's about learning. And for me, success is, did I learn something to better position me for the next time? Because it's not going. If you are truly an entrepreneur, this will not be your first and only opportunity to be an entrepreneur. So the key is to make sure you're taking something from this journey that you can use going forward, and also paying it forward to help other people who come behind you in this journey. There's a quote I use from Nelson Mandela that says, I never lose. I either win or I learn. I apply that in most everything I do. Athletics, working in business, entrepreneurship, etc. So I define success as did I learn something and how can I utilize that to help others and move forward in my journey. Keyona, Bryan, you got anything you want to add to?
Those are the perfect metrics. You either get money or you learn something.
Yeah.
That's my feeling. We have another question from Madison Vanderbilt. How did you build your ecosystem and how did you determine who to trust with your ideas? The second part of that question is one I want to answer, but I'm gonna let you two go first.
I'll say ideas ain't worth nothing. Your idea is worth $0. So when like founders will get on the call and they'll be like, it's my idea or my pitch deck is password protected. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to lunch. Nobody cares because of what makes a startup is execution. Did you actually build that customer list? Did you actually convert those customers? Did you actually solve their problem? Were you actually able to retain those customers? Like you don't like ideas only matter in academia, all right? Like that's the beginning and end of where ideas are a success metric, right? Because think about it. You're all like probably very smart, bright people, and have different types of intelligences. Maybe you're really good at school stuff, or maybe you're really good with your hands and are really great at like putting things together and have several, and you work with cards, and so different ideas have come up that way. Or you love to cook and you've always been great at it, or you've developed that skill over time and you've had a lot of ideas about different recipes or different like cooking approaches. Yeah, that idea can make you feel warm and cozy. It can make you feel like you're the smartest person alive, but it doesn't matter until you put it out into the world, like truly. I think that's a lesson I wish I had learned a lot faster in life, because I have 1,000 ideas every day, many of which could be $1 million ideas, but it's irrelevant to what I actually like do. You know, that is what's important, and that's what I wish I had learned to focus on.
Bryan, you got anything that you want me to jump on that?
Again, as I mentioned earlier, when that mentor, who was a mentor now, called me, he said, nobody's reading your idea that you're sending out. I mean, because if it's about execution, like Keyona said, so your idea is just that. It's an idea that you have. If you can't execute it, then pretty much it's worthless. I don't want to say it's worthless, but it's not something that somebody's looking to steal or looking to duplicate because they don't know the behind the scenes things that you have to do that. Only you know that in the beginning. And so really, who to trust, like be quite honest, once I got into the Atlanta ecosystem and their entrepreneur resources, their startup resources in the areas that you're in, if there aren't, there has to be somebody that you trust, that you've been around, that you can confide in to start off, whether that's a friend or family, you can confide in to start off to get the feel of where you want to go. But once you leave that friends and family area, there are advisors. There are a ton of people out here, as Keyona and Marcus mentioned, that you can talk to that know a lot about entrepreneurship. You can learn a lot online as well. But I think just talking to individuals, I do a little background check. I go look up who they are, what they've done, and things of that nature, just to see are they aligned with where I'm going, or do they know something or have some advice they could give me that can help me on my journey. Those are ways I kind of, see who to let into the ecosystem, with my personal ecosystem, but also, you got to venture out into dealing with others in the ecosystem that surrounds you as well.
Right. Yeah, I mentioned it. I mean, probably at most universities nowadays, there's some organization that fosters entrepreneurship amongst the faculty and students. So that's one good place to start at your university and then expand from there into the city around it. And there are a lot of virtual resources as well. ATDC at Georgia Tech has virtual opportunities to join their ecosystem and learn a lot about entrepreneurship. The one thing I'll say about who to trust your ideas, I got a lot of patents. So I do believe ideas are valuable. You have to, if it can make money, you need to protect it. So that's one thing to sort of keep in mind. You don't want to give everybody the secret sauce on how you solve a problem. So talking about it generically is fine, but once you get into that next level of discussion, if it's a valuable idea, take the steps to protect it. I mean, one thing I did in my career as a researcher at Bell Labs is that I funded a lot of academic research and people weren't protecting our ideas. So we built products that generated revenue out of that. So just keep that in mind. It's not really valuable until you execute, but in some cases it could be. Just go through the due diligence to be sure. Are there any more questions? I think we're running up on time. I don't know if there's another session immediately after this one. We could stay on a few more minutes and field any other questions that you might have. But if you have to go to your next session, we want to thank you for participating and having this dialogue with us. We're very passionate about what we do at Pruuvn, and equally passionate about helping future entrepreneurs be successful as well. So with that, Grant, I don't know if there's anything you needed the instructions you needed to give or anything you needed to say.
Nothing at the end, just to inform everyone to join another session, but thank you guys so much for your time.
Okay, well, thank you for having us, and we enjoyed it.
Yeah.
We can stay on a few minutes. I don't know if there's another bridge on this. Is this unique to our bridge? Our
I think this
session?
is unique to this session.
Okay, well, we can stay a few minutes if somebody has some other questions. But thank you again. Thank you for attending.
Marcus, I was just wondering real quick, when I was reading your bio, when I read about the NASA mission program, I was wondering just what that process was like, and what skills you were able to pick up there or use.
Yeah, that was it was an interesting process. I mean, it was like 4,000 applicants, I think, in the class that I was in, and they interviewed like maybe close to 100 of us who were finalists, and they ended up selecting that year 21 astronauts, and I was ranked 23rd, I think, in that class.
Wow.
So you go through a lot of, they do a lot of screening on paper and stuff, and everybody's pretty much the same when you go to interview. And during that process, there's a lot of cognitive tests they give you, psychological tests. They put you in a little sphere, like the size of a balloon, size of a stability ball. They zip you up in it and then cut off the air and see how you're gonna react. You sit in it for like 30 minutes and they monitor you, how you respond to that environment. That's the way they do emergency rescues in space. They put you in a sealed container. So they do a lot of, psychological stuff. I learned a lot just meeting people and networking with folks who had similar goals and ideas that I had, and similar things they wanted to accomplish in life. A lot of us became entrepreneurs who were not in that program, who weren't out of 21 that were selected.
Okay, wow, yeah, great. Thank you so much. That's it for me.
Ms. Watson asked if we have internships. That's something we're pursuing or interested in doing right now. We have internships that are not paid internships. That might not be, we have unpaid internships, put it that way. We've had a couple of programs with Georgia Tech and a couple of other institutions where we had, interns who worked with us, or co-ops, I guess, during the school year to solve certain market research problems for us. We don't have any paid internships yet, but that's something that we're looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, it's like there's always work to do, but
yeah, there's always work to do, but we don't have resources yet for paid internships. But it's a great learning opportunity. We've had a couple of student groups who work with us to solve particular problems or look at particular questions for us in terms of market research. And they've learned a lot doing it. And it's a good thing to put on, include in their portfolio. We've had some designers to do work for us, our website and other things too. That was more of an unpaid type of an opportunity they use in their portfolio also. One thing I did want to mention that Keyona talked about earlier is the value of becoming a salesperson. Or you don't have to do that formally, but at some point you got to be able to communicate and sell your idea to somebody in order to get them to either invest in it, join your team, join your journey, or whatever it is. So that is a very valuable skill. And I didn't realize it early in my career as a technologist, the importance of that. When I thought about it, and when I moved up into executive management, I was selling, really, even as a vice president of research. I was selling capability, selling research ideas and concepts. It became about selling. And that's a very important skill set to acquire. You don't have to do it formally, like I mentioned, but it's something to consider. Somebody has their hand up. Okay. Yes, sir.
How's everybody doing? I want to thank you for presenting to us today. I feel like I learned a lot from you all. My name is Ban. I'm currently a rising senior at USC studying business and with a minor in political science.
Okay.
And I think my question is, since there's a very small amount of Black founders in the US, and there's kind of like this balancing act, like I feel like Keyona spoke about it a little bit earlier, that there's like a need for products that serve our communities, but at the same time, people feel like they don't have the resources to be able to do that, so they just don't try. So how would me, graduating next year, looking to like start my own venture, kind of be able to have that impact within my communities, but still be able to kind of find like co-founders, find the community members, and still be able to like motivate other people to take on that entrepreneurship journey while still looking at the reality that there isn't that many resources. So I mean, for me personally, I grew up like in South LA. I didn't around like our areas, there's not like too much going on in terms of entrepreneurship, but trying to get that motivation, trying to like push people to kind of move in that direction. That's kind of like my question, like how do we do that? But I still took a looking at the reality of the situation.
So you're really okay. You said you're in South LA.
Yeah, in Hawthorne.
So I will say that I promise, LA has plenty of entrepreneurship resources. I don't know they are, but give it a good 20 minutes of research. Especially with starting with finding entrepreneurs that live in LA, because California's got entrepreneurship up and down the coast. San Diego is a bio and water hub, so there's a lot of research in those fields that's going on there. And obviously San Francisco, the global mecca of entrepreneurship, at least right now, is also up there. Like those resources exist, and now that we live in a digital world, like we're having this conference right now, just like on Zoom. I'm in Alabama, you're in you're in SoCal. So like take advantage of that. Go on LinkedIn. So this is my homework to you, for real. Go on LinkedIn, find 5 LA-based entrepreneurs, and 1 LA-based accelerator program. There are plenty. I want to say Plug and Play is in LA. Am I wrong?
What's the name what's the name of the network that we were part of, Bryan? There was the guy, he was my classmate at Georgia Tech. I can't think of the name of it, but he's in LA.
Yeah, I can't think of it right now, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, there are tons of resources in LA in that area. But starting, you said you're at USC?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, start there. I mean, I know they have a go ahead, what were you saying?
I'm a part of the entrepreneurship, like, because I go to the business school and we kind of have an entrepreneurship section there, and I'm a part of like a lot of the resources that they have. But I meant like more like community wise. But like that's a good point Keyona made. I feel like there are like incubators, especially. I know there's a couple.
And there's some incubators that are focused on social problems or things that might be more aligned to what you're looking at. Look for those too. There are venture capitalists who invest, especially, we don't necessarily go to venture capital. Look for early stage investors who are aligned with the same, they have the same thesis in terms of their investments that are aligned to the problem or sector you wanna face, or you wanna get into, rather.
And not even like with an idea or anything. You can just go to them and be like, hey, I want to learn about the ecosystem. Can you start pointing me in the right direction? Who should I be talking to?
Yeah, I was gonna say the ecosystem. Yeah, ask them, because they know they're in it. If you ask them, they'll tell you, because that's something that they're willing to, divulge. So I would definitely ask the question about where's the ecosystem for this type of problem I'm trying to solve. How do I get involved as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, Max Ventures is in LA. We know them. We talked to them a couple times. But I'm trying to find the name of this.
Max Ventures.
Yeah, Mac Ventures.
Yeah, Mac.
Yeah, Mac Ventures. Yeah, we talked to them a couple.
I want to say Village Capital is out there too.
Yeah, there's many resources in the LA area, but again, and finding those that are aligned to, they have an investment thesis aligned to the sector you want to challenge is what I would encourage you to do. And LinkedIn is a great resource to start with, as well as a couple of others. Some might cost money. PitchBook, does PitchBook have a free?
No, PitchBook
It's
is
not free. Yeah, but the
Uh,
university probably has access to that.
They should go to the library. Your library, indispensable resource. There should be a lead of business and entrepreneurship. So a librarian that just is in charge of that. Go and talk to that librarian and see what they know. Just be like, this is where I am. This is my goal. How should I think about things? Like, give me context, help me develop a map for myself. And on that note of your earlier point, like, I want you to adopt the mindset, or there's a unicorn founder here in Birmingham who is, I want to say he's Nigerian, but I don't want to jump that gun. So I'll just say he is an African founder. And the way he describes it is, for some people, they are 10 steps away from that goal of building that multi-million-dollar company, right? Maybe you have 50 steps between where you are at and building that multi-million-dollar company. Get started. Because those 50 steps are 50 steps regardless, right? So yes, there are other people that like have easier access to resources, who have friends and families who are more generous than yours are, or that will go the extra mile to like introduce them to enterprise level customers because they already work in that space. There will always be somebody that has like a better advantage than you do. And I just want you to adopt the mindset of going, okay, and continuing on your route anyways, because your route is a path that you still have to follow in order to get to where you're going. And there are definitely shortcuts. And I think the shortcuts are like, the good kind of shortcut is other people. So other people building, having a strong idea that has been tested, that you can then like build a team around is huge. The best thing you can do for your community, your local community, in terms of an economic investment and building the amount of options that your community has, is by building a fantastic business and hiring locally and being the kind of business owner that trains and allows people a pathway to growth within your company. So just learn how to build a great company. That's from sales to marketing to business development to operations to product design. Like, there's a lot of things that you need to have a certain level of mastery over. Get started on that journey. And I know on-campus resources can be like hit or miss. At UCSD, we had the basement, but they were literally only interested if you were a STEM like student wanting to turn your ideas into an IP that they could co-invest in. So you just had an appetite for entrepreneurship like I had. They didn't care. That was not what their focus was. So be hungry. And when you come against obstacles, like maybe your entrepreneurship club is milk toast and they're not giving you the kind of skills that you're looking for, go get an internship at a local startup or talk to the ecosystem and learn what opportunities are available, because I promise you, there are thousands and thousands of opportunities. You just have to be bold enough to look for them, and be smart enough and wise enough in your approach to where you're impressing people along the way, you know?
I just put a couple of links. Valence Community is the organization I was thinking about. They're based in LA, and it's a network of Black professionals who are focused on entrepreneurship and other things. So that might, if they're still in, I think they're still very active, but we talked to them a couple of years ago, and a good friend of mine is one of the founders of that. But that might be a place to look also in terms of expanding your network.
And I just threw in an article about the LA startup ecosystem. Read through that and pick out the people that you want to talk to. By the end of next week, I need you to have reached out for an informational interview to 5 people. And that's like a 20-minute conversation. Write up an agenda beforehand. Have 1 to 2 like key questions that you want to ask, given what your goals are, and then just run with it.
Great. Any other questions or any other comments anybody has before we sign off? right, well, thank you again for joining us. And thank you for staying over and having this discussion. We appreciate it. Always happy to participate.
All right,
Just threw
thank
in a
you.
resource for informational interviews. Please, all of you read it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, take care. Good luck.
All right, bye.
All right, thanks.